The reason why we wanted to put this together, I know there's some of our MFA students here and some people I haven't met yet, but we really wanted people to kind of get an idea of what it is that, what it takes to be a professor and you know, get your MFA and be a professor, and what it means to have an MFA as well. And some of you guys might be thinking of going into education, to teaching, or maybe you're artists and you want to know how to continue doing your art and also, you know, go into teaching, and that's what we're going to do here. And so my name is Neri Lemus, and I'm the director of the MFA program here at Azusa Pacific University. I'm a practicing artist. I work with Charlie James Gallery in Chinatown. I've been with them for about 8 years, and I've been teaching for several years as well. And so I was pleased when I met my students and I found out that they were teaching as well. So I just wanted to bring them aboard and ask them some questions and get a conversation started. So as we are talking, please feel free to, you know, raise your hand and ask some questions so we can have more of a conversation environment, so that we make sure that we get to answer all you guys' questions as well. So I'm going to introduce our panelists here. So we have David Bess. He teaches at the University of Laverne here in California. A little of his bio: he joined the photography department in fall of 2012 to direct students in Photo 499, which is senior project. And he's working today as the senior adjunct instructor. And then we have Daniel Hall, and he's at Indiana Wesleyan University in Indiana. He's an assistant professor of art, and he's been with IWU since the fall of 2001 in the capacity of instructor for the courses of Drawing 1 and 2, Visual Communications and Art for Elementary Teachers. And at the end, we have Brianne Witt, who's at Spring Arbor University in Michigan, and she's a lecturer there. She has an extensive background in printmaking and in a broad range of media from teaching in public schools. And of course, all of them are getting their MFA here at APU. So the first question I want to ask you all is, most universities, they say, well, you need 2 to 3 years of teaching experience to be able to teach here. And that's the hard part, right? You know, you want to apply to a university job, but they say, you know what, you need to be teaching for like 2-3 years. It's like, well, how can I teach if no one's ever given me the opportunity to teach, right? So how did it happen for you guys? For y'all? Anybody?
I'll go first. I graduated from Spring Arbor University with a visual art education degree, and so sorry. And after graduation, I tried to pursue substitute teaching, but was unable to get that going for me. But then I got a call, and it was a school in Michigan, public school, K through 8th grade, art teacher position was open, and they called me and asked me to come in for an interview. I hadn't reached out to this particular school. It was actually the people of the university that I went to. In the education program, they reached out for me, they sent out some of my information, and got me in touch with that school. So I was able to get in K through 8th grade teaching, taught there for about 3 years.
Did you have a credential at the time?
I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I had already graduated. I was out probably a couple months after that. I think I got hired February, and I graduated like in December. I was one of those odd ones, you know, was in school for like 5.5 years. But then, so after 3 years, I was looking for some other K through 8th grade jobs, but then I got a call again. And this time it was from my old professors in the art program at Spring Arbor University, where I did my undergrad. And they were having a job opening and called me up and said, hey, we know you don't have your master's, but apply for the job. You have background here. We just like to see you try for it. And then went through the whole process. And so really, it was my connections. It's the people I stayed in contact with. It's the relationships you build when you're in a program. So that definitely helped me out. I got super blessed to have that come towards me. And now I'm at the process of putting my own feelers out for other potential jobs now that I'll be getting my master's and getting to that official professor title that I've been wanting. So, yeah.
Awesome.
My journey began a long time ago. I started a Master of Arts program. So this is a second master's degree for me. And I received an MA degree from the University of Northern Iowa in 1991. And for my graduation, my parents sent me on a trip to Israel with one of the professors from Indiana Wesleyan University. And so it was at a very odd time. The Persian Gulf War was just about ready to break out. Our tour was scheduled from like the 5th through the 17th of January 1991. And so it was an early graduation present. I was graduating in April of 91. And so what happened while we were over there, the professor was so tense several days because of certain things going on. And whoever was in war with Israel at the time was saying, we're going to bomb Israel on the 15th if our demands aren't met. So our tour was supposed to be there through the 17th, and the professor, our tour guide, was really tense for many, many days. Our flights were canceled. There were so many issues that took place while we were there. But so that's something that you don't forget, when you're on a tour like that and all these things happen. Okay, so I graduate. I have my master's degree now, and I'm looking for teaching positions. I really believe that God has placed a call on my life to teach art. And somehow in my head, I believe God had placed on my heart that I would be teaching art in a Wesleyan university. And so I couldn't find a teaching job right after I got my degree, and I had put out all kinds of applications, and I did all the work you're supposed to do when you first get your degree, And at that time, the MA degree was a degree that you could teach at a university level with. So I sent out all those applications, and when nothing came back, I took a position which would allow me to be able to use my talents. So I had both art and music talents, and I was hired by a church to do music. And I moved to Indianapolis, and during that time of teaching, there was a day in which I felt like, all right, the music time is over. I think it's time for me to start teaching again. I need to start looking for some opportunities to teach. And so I started putting job applications out again. And it was by sheer chance one day, I had retired my position at the church and was no longer doing music ministry. I had created my own job teaching art and music, created my own school in my home garage and transformed it into like a teaching lab. And so I was getting my own teaching experience, although it wasn't college or university level. But Indiana Wesleyan had these accelerated programs for adults. I taught 5 different classes that were 5 weeks long. It was my foot in the door. And I did that for a year. I made $4,500 in a year's time. And needless to say, all our savings were going down. It was a step of faith for me, believing that I was following God's will for my life. And just out of sheer circumstances, as poor as we were at the time, my wife and I were starving. We'd been out running errands and stopped at a fast food restaurant. In comes this guy that I think is the guy who led our tour, Dr. Wilbur Williams from Israel. And I didn't remember if that was him or not. It sure looked a lot like him, so I mustered up the courage. I went up to him and I said, "Excuse me, are you Wilbur Williams?" And he said, "Guilty as charged," and shook my hand real hard, and I was going like that. And I said, "Well, you probably don't remember me, but 20 years ago now, I was on a tour with you to Israel. It was right before the Persian Gulf War broke out." And he just goes, "Oh, yes," and he started going off on how things were so tense, and he was talking about all the details of the trip with me, things I didn't even know. And he asked me, "What are you doing now?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking for a teaching position in art." His wife was the chair of the art department at IWU, and they were hiring someone. And I had no idea, but I showed up at the right time at the right place with Dr. Wilbur Williams. He took me by the hand, pulled me over. I mean, literally, I was going like this as he was pulling me to his wife, introduced me to his wife, and she said, "I need you on campus on Wednesday." It was like Saturday. I had to pull my application together again, which I had already sent to them a year ago. I had an interview on Wednesday that went all day long. Now they're 2 days long, so I'm thankful I didn't have to go through that. But somehow a miracle of God orchestrating events for my life that really, he wanted for me and put on my heart years ago when I was a 20-year-old kid in college.
Well, my journey started a number of years ago. I had my own photography business in the late 80s and began thinking, some of the greatest stories that I had was actually showing other people how to make photographs. And so I said, there's something to this. So I went to school, did a lot of my undergrad work at a local college near here, Mount San Antonio College in Walnut. Did quite a bit there, and in the midst of all that, I got married, had kids, and so education was kind of set along the sidelines while I was, taking care of my family. But then years later, we're saying, you know what, I need to revisit this because I love engaging with people, I love teaching, I love photography. So I ended up attending the University of Laverne through their adult program called Kappa, and so I was actually starting there working on a business degree when I happened to walk over to the photo department. It was kind of it wasn't accidental. I walked over there and met the staff, and they said, looking at your transcripts, which they had access to, you've taken pretty much everything. Why don't you just finish and get your bachelor's? And I said, So I ended up becoming a double major. Went through the program, and in my last semester, the chairman of the photography department asked if I would be interested in coming on as an assistant to him in the classes that he taught. And so I did that, spent a semester as a teaching assistant, and at the end of that semester, he invited me to come on board the faculty, which to me was unheard of. It was completely, in my mind, a God thing as well, because it doesn't happen that way in academia. And so I was invited to come on board as an adjunct, and I taught one class, and then 2 classes, and then 3. And so it was just kind of a miraculous thing. This past semester, I was brought on as senior adjunct professor, which was amazing. The one stipulation, though, that was part of this was that if he brings me on board with a bachelor's, I'm going to pursue an MFA. And so that led me to the search and where I am today.
Interesting. Awesome. So it sounds like it has to be a full moon, it has to be 53 degrees out, and then you could get a job,
Yeah.
right? No, but it does sound like there's certain relationships that you guys established beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we say, same thing with me, one of my old professors from Art Center College of Design said, "Hey, do you want to come teach a class?" Sure, let's do it. And then from there, it's like, I got my 2 years experience. Now I can apply and, you know, I fit the ticket. But yeah, it seems like it's like I don't know, it's impossible sometimes, but it's not. There's actual things that happen. And from what I hear from most of you guys, it's those relationships you made during undergrad and, you know, definitely during grad school that carry over and are that support system that you guys have as you continue to seek work, employment in the future. Any questions so far? Anything about that period of trying to find a job, you know, nothing?
It just seems mystical.
Mystical.
It does.
Mhm.
Just a chance encounter. It's like, how do we make, thank you, how do we make that happen for us, other than the social networking?
Yeah.
I'd like to speak to that for a second. Some of that is not as mystical as you think. It's about being open to building relationships. You can't be afraid to talk to the people, regardless of the sign on their door, how you think they're so high up they'll never talk to me. You have to be willing to build those relationships. And when I say that, I don't mean from the standpoint of saying I'm going to do this so I'll get this, but the building of genuine relationships. The chairman of the department that gave me this job retired, but yet we're still friends and still talk on a regular basis. And I think that there's something about the genuineness of building those relationships that will definitely have an impact on future relationships and future opportunities.
I have a question. So, I mean, in all of your stories, I think that that's pretty typical, like how people get opportunities. But so then why are there submission guidelines? Why is it when you send your resume to a university, it never gets really looked at? Like, why is it, like, can you, any of you speak to how the process actually goes at your university now? And if that's even something people should be pursuing, if it really is all about relationships. And my question to that is, like, what if you want to get a job at another city where you don't have a community built? Like, it seems a little difficult to build community in another place before you're even there. Yeah. So do you follow the formula and just knowing that your resume and everything goes to a pile that nobody looks at?
We've hired many students who come through our programs at IWU because we know their work ethic, we know their mission fit, we know so many things about them that work because they've come through our program. We know who they've been for 4 years, and then they go off and get their master MFA degrees, and they come back interested in teaching. And so those people are really, really easy for us to interview, but doesn't mean they always get the job. Our process involves national searches every time where we have, send the information out. And then we have a committee within the art department, but also a committee within administration, a committee within our mission fit for the university that all come together to look at the applications. We make recommendation from the art department. We look at the committee will look at every application and then bring it to the Division of Art and Design. And we then will all look at 3 of those top 3, and we'll choose 2 of them to come for interviews. And our interview process is a 2-day interview process where they meet with faculty, they teach, they meet with administration, they meet with the religion philosophy areas to see if they're a right mission fit for our university. There's so many details to what happens within that application. But the applications are very important that you, in putting those together, that you have the best imagery. We've looked at great artists who have terrible portfolios, and we just couldn't move forward because it speaks to their quality control. So that's why knowing someone, helps you say, participate with defending them if that needs to be, but not, typically it's a long process of months of interviewing, phone interviews before there's a personal interview, invite to campus, it's quite involved.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm glad you said that. Like, the process is so important. So, it depends. Like, if you're applying for a full-time faculty job, then yeah, it's going to be more extensive. But for adjunct work, it's different, And I think that you should definitely apply. Again, part of it is like building yourself as an artist, right? So at the end of the day, if I have a basketball school and Kobe Bryant wants to teach, I'm probably going to give him the job, right? So part of that is like, what are you doing in your own career, right? If you've shown here, if you're working, really hard into building yourself as an artist, because that's what most schools want. Because when students come, they want to know they're working with somebody that knows, that has an exhibition, that knows, I've worked in the gallery system, I've worked out, professionally, So I've been in a lot of like different ones where it was, maybe even more than this, of faculty members, and I'm right there by myself, and they're asking me all these questions, and I feel like I committed a crime or something, and it's so uncomfortable. And I've been in other ones where they actually invite me, okay, they bring in a bunch of students, and they say, okay, we're gonna go into this gallery, I want you to critique their artwork, and then they're with their boards, and then they're writing things down, So, at the end of the day, certain schools are looking for particular people. Yeah, they're gonna go for the resources, but if, I have someone that's good, that's near me, that in my circle, but then I get this resource outside that I just cannot deny. I can't deny it. It's like, that's it. But in a lot of things that you do, you just gotta take the chance and apply. You know what I mean? I don't know if I told you guys, but I do have two folders. I have a folder full of my rejection letters and a folder full of all my accomplishments. And I keep them, and I look them over, and it's like, And then I look at all my accomplishments, And I think it's a good practice because we forget, and the relationships are important, right? I mean, man, I met Bill. He doesn't remember this, but I met Bill years ago. I came and I was kind of trying to hit on getting it. He won't remember that, but now I'm the director of an art program, So it's like, so it happens. But go for it.
Can you please explain or elaborate because most of us here are already teachers or thinking about teaching.
Right.
The difference between whether somebody is hired, even as an adjunct, with a master's in art education versus a master's in fine arts, so that someone can decide which one is going to apply better to their needs.
You guys want to?
Yeah, I could say at least for my university, our department's kind of interesting because I teach in the photography department, which is a separate entity from the art department in communications. Yet, we still require an MFA. That's the degree we're looking for across the board. Yeah, and I want to touch back with you for a second because it was important. It was brought up. There are two different tracks when you're coming into a university system. If you're looking at a tenure track or a professorial, that's very different from the adjunct track. An adjunct track does not work the same way. It's in some universities, it's a matter of, they'll keep your resume on file and you have the qualifications, you could be called, at any time. And so there is a difference of those two. So I don't want to sound like doom and gloom that there's only one way to get in, it's going to take years and all these things, but that is a different track and not really a bad one to look at as well.
If you're interested in teaching at a specific university, you should be making connections and relationships and friendships with those professors, and especially the professors that know that you're interested in teaching with, too. To get that adjunct experience and get your foot in the door is really vital. And it's very helpful to have people that know your work, that know your work ethic, that know you, your personal life, you know, and so you're spending time with them as much as you can, like you said earlier, is this building relationship as part of it. And keep building your work, just keep making.
Another thing, I was fortunate to teach 12 years as an adjunct for several community colleges in the Denver, Aurora area in Colorado. And one thing that really impresses people is showing up to the art openings, showing up to the student shows, showing up to the community functions and just the college functions. That way you can really get yourself known, and rubbing shoulders with the people in that department, because if they don't know who you are, you have less of a chance of getting your foot in the door. So it's networking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And offer to come into the classroom, you know?
Yeah.
Offer to, hey, I'd love to come and share a day this semester with your students. And this is what I'd like to share with them, you know, and have a plan in place and you know, open yourself up to getting your foot in the door, but make the effort to take that first step.
Yeah, because a lot of times professors will be looking for guest speakers anyway for their classes, so that way students who are pursuing a career in either just the fine arts or art education, you know, they get that outside experience and seeing what people are doing within their occupation and career path. So, sorry.
Cool. The next question I have is, has your MFA education impacted the way you teach at your universities, right? So you were teaching before you got your MFA. So now you're getting your MFA. Some of you guys are about to finish, and so you've been going back and forth because it's a low residency program. How has it impacted your, the way you teach?
Well, in my terms, it reminds me to be aware of what it's like to be a student again, primarily, and learning what that means and the things I'm asking my students to do. And so there's an affinity that we have for each other at that point. But in terms of what my work's doing and how it applies to the teaching, is that I'm finding myself, and this might sound really bad, but I'm finding myself getting tougher as a teacher, believe it or not. I'm finding myself becoming more critical, because my thoughts are, if my students want to get to the point where they could get into a grad school program, if I'm just saying, oh, look at the pretty flower, that was so good, you did such a good job on that, 100%. I'm really not helping them, because they're going to bring that same portfolio to a grad school submission, and they're going to get hurt. And so I'm actually, my students may not appreciate that now, but hopefully they'll appreciate it later, that it's helping me to build my skills to be better in my critiques as I'm receiving critiques as well. And that's been just a huge, huge advantage, and will be to my students.
Awesome.
Moving this over. I want to bounce off of what you said about the critiques. I mean, that is a huge thing that I see a change in how I interact with my students, is just getting them to talk about their work a completely different way. Because I'm still learning to do that with our own personal shows and gallery talks that we have to do, and oral defenses, and having them tear our artwork apart. I mean, so
we don't do that. We don't believe in that philosophy.
And you're right. And so I've definitely been challenging my students not only to talk about the work, but also write about it more. And it's building those relationships. It's making them stronger when I'm interacting with my students. And it's also preparing them for when they go into the professional world. We have a lot of graphic designers going through our program. And to be able to talk about what you're doing in graphic design, I mean, that's going to be huge when you go and meet a future employer. So the critiques have definitely changed, and also the different resources, different scholarly journals and books, philosophers that we're learning about either maybe all over again or adding into our bookshelf that we can then bring to our students. I love getting all those resources, especially with all the different classes I teach. I got some that deal with the human figure. I got some that deal with 2D design, or again, your philosophy behind your artwork, conceptual brainstorming and development. All that stuff is fantastic resources that I can then bring to my students, and it's fresh in my mind. So.
For me, you can't be aware of something that you're not aware of. And going into the MFA program, there were so many things about contemporary art. When I started looking at MFA programs, there were certain criteria that I had that I wanted for myself. One, I want to go to a Christian university if I can. Two, I wanted to be in a major city where the art, contemporary art world has a major influence. I don't want to go someplace that doesn't have that. So there are like, Chicago, New York, LA, Miami. There are only certain places that I would look at because I needed something that would help me. My weakness going into the MFA program was contemporary art. I needed something that would help me understand it for my students. I'm doing this on behalf of myself because I want to grow, I want to learn, I am a lifelong learner. I've demonstrated that my whole life, but I also want to be a lifelong giver, where I'm constantly taking what I'm getting and then passing it on. And in that process of giving to my students, man, I get back so much more. And they're connecting now with contemporary art world in ways in my classes that are inspiring me, like my own professors. My students have become my teachers to help me also keep learning this thing that I was weak at, I feel so much stronger, so much better because the MFA program is something that has allowed me to learn about one of the weakest areas that I didn't understand.
That's great. Going along that same line, maybe I'll ask both of you, what made you come here to APU to, it's a school that combines faith, practice and theory. So, you said the location was one and faith. What about you? Both of you guys?
Mine was pretty similar to Daniel, actually, and I can't deny the fact that I looked at cost. Yes, it costs a little bit to travel out here, but compared to some of the other programs, it was something that I could afford to do, and to be able to travel out here to a place that's completely different than where I'm at in Michigan is a big benefit. So I can't add too much because he said a lot of my own personal thoughts and feelings about it. And also, I teach at a Christian university as well, and so having that kind of connection and bringing faith into your classes and your art practice and critical thinking, that was a big deal for sure.
For me, it hit several marks. Location was a benefit. I live in Covina, which is just literally blocks down the street for me, but that really wasn't my primary. My primary consideration was the low residency aspect, that I could come in the summer when I'm not teaching, and then the fact that I'm working in a program that is Christian based, which was also important because what I do outside of this, I'm actually a pastor. So this was like the perfect blend. But I noticed something, this being my second summer here, is that my reason for being here is changed. If it became a non-low residency program and I had to come in a regular semester, I still would, because now what I appreciate about the program, more so than low residency, is the faculty. The personal contact that we have through this program, the one-on-one time, the mentorship, is something that I've become just so so appreciative of. And so regardless of the other factors, which, by the way, keep them. I love the locals that see it and all that. That's good. But I've really come to appreciate the relationships we have a chance to build with the faculty here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I mean, I think that that's the, honestly, for most MFA programs, that's really what ends up happening, you know. I had a wonderful mentor that was at CalArts, Charles Gaines, and I still have, you know, a good relationship with him. And I think that that's what happens when you do attend an MFA program, is those relationships, the mentoring that occurs that just stays with you, you know, for the rest of your life. And I mean, that's one of the biggest things I took out of my my MFA education, you know, is the relationships, and from that, opportunities came, you know. So the other thing I was thinking about is I've frequently found individuals that are, you know, get into teaching, you know, I mean, it could be in different, you know, areas, whether it's, you know, middle school, high school, or even college, and they stop doing their own art, right? So how do you feel the MFA's prepared you to continue to have your own individual practice, you know? That's kind of like what I was thinking and asking all of you guys.
Well,
all three of you.
In my case, for years, and this was actually, I was just interviewed regarding my author statement, which I'm putting together, is the fact that so much of my work was based on client requests. I was doing portraiture, client work, I was doing my projects for the students, which was very different, and I found myself not really doing much of anything of what I wanted to do, which I could say is my own work. And so as a benefit to this program, I feel like I was given permission to be able to do my own work and also develop a way of thinking that allows me to do those other things, but now to allow myself time to be able to be in my studio to work in those areas. And so to me, it was very meaningful, not just assisting me from the standpoint of my career, but also very freeing to me as an artist. And being able to merge those two titles has been just fantastic.
Awesome.
The first 3 years of teaching are so hard. I mean, you're preparing to teach and then assessing, and preparing to teach and assess. And it was, for me, jumping into the university teaching with just a year under my belt, teaching 5 courses that were 5 weeks long for the university. It gave me a foot in the door because I was already hired by the university as a, you know, adult professional study fast track to getting a degree. But when I went to teaching on the traditional campus, the amount of preparation needed to teach for several hours became so overwhelming. And for the first 3 years, I didn't have an art practice. I was just trying to exist and not embarrass myself or, you know, show up in class dumber than the students. I had a lot of life experience. I was, you know, 43 years old, I think, when I started. That can be right. 38 years old when I started. And so I had a lot of experience, but keeping the art practice going during those 3 years was, I did little things, but not much. By the 5th year, I had things down. The courses I was teaching, I felt like I had better control of. But my art practice had been asleep, you know, for 3 years. And to get it going was basically only done in the summertime. I'm embarrassed by that. And that's another reason for getting into this program. One of my goals was I need to work. And the beauty of that aspect of being in the MFA program created for me opportunities to keep working and producing. It created a whole new level of respect from my students in my classrooms. For me to show them my work, talk with them about my ideas, have them critique my work, and me defend it in front of them has been a tremendous blessing and relationship building between a faculty and student, you know. But, and now I can't imagine going forward where I'm not producing work consistently, you know. And so that was a huge blessing to being a part of the MFA.
I'm similar to you in the sense that my work stopped after I graduated my undergrad because I went right into teaching. I didn't have substitute teaching under my belt, so you had years of experience, I didn't. I started out like really fresh, and so to go from a student to suddenly taking over a classroom, I was in a sense terrified and trying to manage that, and I just wanted to focus on being the best teacher I could be in the classroom that I was given, with the supplies and materials that I was given. And then from that, I still hadn't made work, but then I got hired into being a full-time professor, instructor, and now I'm shifting from K through 8th grade to teaching at a college course, and at least 5 different classes. So I teach the drawing, painting, 2D design, advanced classes, the general ed art appreciation. I taught all of that. And so I also had to learn how to create the curriculum. I had to teach the curriculum and do the assessments, all that. It was just new. So again, art was put aside. And so again, just like you, coming to the MFA program just really like kicked my butt back into gear and reminded me of what I liked to do, you know, why I was going down this path. I mean, I also involved my students within my art process and the creation of my work. They even acted as subjects for my work as well. And so it was awesome being able to share that with them, like the final product. But yeah, I was embarrassed that I had taken so many years off of creating my own work. And now getting back into it, I just want to keep challenging myself to try new art mediums, new subject matter, and be able to teach that even more effectively. So it's not only helping me as an artist, but also as an educator still.
Right.
And I want to be able to teach my students all the things that they want to learn from me. And that requires making more work. So.
Any questions or any comments on Brianne's? Yes.
Thank you. I'm really curious because, you know, being faith-based artists in an art world that isn't necessarily, maybe it's an assumption of mine, but I assume that the art world itself isn't a large percentage, isn't faith-based. But correct me if I'm wrong, but what does that feel like? How do you exist in that world as an artist that's based on your faith? So can you give me kind of like a picture of what that looks like as an educator, as a Christian, as an artist in this world? What does that look like?
Do you want to answer this? I just think of your artwork, so.
Yeah, I don't think of them differently. I think of my faith is integrated into my life, and my faith is integrated into my art. And I can't separate them. It's a part of being, existing, living, sharing relationship. It's a part of just, you know, just everything I do, every person I meet, you know, is my faith is who I am as much as the skin is who I am, you know. So I can't, and I don't want to try to separate them. And I don't try to be in any certain group. I just try to be faithful. I don't try to exist in that community of artists or that community of artists. I just try to be who I am in making art. And if they get it, they get it. If they don't, you know, I'm just trying to do my very best to live the way God made me and not apologize. That's,
Yeah, I'm right with you on that. It's so much about who we are. I think that to simplify the statement in my mind is that I don't label myself as a Christian artist. I label myself as an artist who's a Christian. And in doing so, it reminds me that this is not a compartmentalized life I live. It's not, okay, my pastoral work is over here, my artwork is here. That's when you start messing up. That's when things start to get really difficult. And so in my life, it's all one and the same. There's different facets to all of our lives. And so I'm really hesitant to label everything, because in doing so, I might actually ostracize someone that might benefit from something I have to offer. And so I don't want to do that. I don't want to create a fence that's going to prevent a relationship from developing as a result of that. So, yeah.
It's a good point. And I mean, to that same effect, like because my work's dealt with identity, right? So I've never labeled myself as a Latino artist or Chicano artist or anything like that. I'm an artist that happens to belong to a particular cultural group, which I love dearly, But the same thing, I'm a person who's an artist who is also a person of faith, but I'm not a Christian artist, right? And that's how I view it. And for me, when I graduated grad school, within a short period of time, I got picked up and represented by a gallery, So I started in that world right away. And honestly, no one really, I'll throw in, my work deals with social issues, but no one really, maybe till like last year, someone knew that because they're a person of faith, and they asked me in a panel about my faith and stuff, and I don't deny it, but it's just, it came out, and I was like, yeah, and I started talking about those things, but it's, but again, it's like I'm able to engage in different conversations, and that's fine. But there are many artists where people of faith who are like well established, and I'm finding out, like, really, So, but let me ask you guys one more question. Why teach art? What's your teaching philosophy, and why is teaching art important? I was thinking about that, and so, yeah, why teach art?
well, I think I'm made as a visual person. I know I'm not as auditory as I am visual, or kinesthetic, so as part of who I am, the way for me to communicate through my artwork is helpful for me. I also think that art has the ability to speak in so many other ways that inspire me and inspire others. When someone stops to look at your work, ponder it, decipher it, criticize it, or they just engage in it in some way, and you just see them, they don't know you're the artist, they're just looking at the work, and just going at it like that. There's something about it, that this dialogue that's taking place between the work. One of the books we had to read in theory, talked about how the image has a life of its own, and it has the ability to speak. And I truly believe that art is as much alive and trying to relate to me as I am alive trying to relate through my artwork. And there's something about that interaction that takes place that offers relationship, communication, and I also believe truly that there's an aspect of God, Spirit, that can say something through that work in a way that I could never do through words, So.
I come from very hands-on, artsy people, so that's part of my background as well. But I do find that you get so connected to the world and to each other through art. And you can learn so much about the world through art and through the creation of it.
Yeah.
again, I teach all those different classes, painting, drawing, you know, figure drawing, and then art appreciation about the contemporary world, and traditional, Renaissance, classical pieces. And I mean, they all have so much to offer in the sense of just learning about history, learning about each other and different cultures. And I'm very much a visual person. And I love learning through that.
Yeah.
But with the art creation, I like that it slows you down and it gets you in touch with what you're seeing, what you're observing, and looking at it on a deeper level. And you also look at yourself a different way when you're creating art. And so I think that's what stands out to me the most. I mean, piggybacking off of that, right? Because I definitely tell my students to just slow down and observe, especially with how many times they draw out their phones or they're listening to music. I mean, I'm just constantly like, put them away, like interact with each other, like get to know each other and get to know the work that you're making. And yeah, I mean, it is a spiritual practice. It really is. It's meditative, it's therapy, it's all that beautiful stuff.
Awesome.
Well, outside of my love for the medium of photography, outside of my love for the craft, the reason why I love teaching it is because comparing the first day to the last day, watching my students on the first day who they haven't even figured out how to put the lens on their camera, let alone make adjustments. They're frightened, they're scared, they have no clue what to do. And then seeing them again at the end of the semester producing work that makes them feel like, wow, look what I did. And they're so proud. And I say, yeah, that's for the refrigerator at home. You know, we gotta have fun with them with that. But seeing that spark of creativity, especially in the students who thought, I can't do this, but you know, or they take my course because they think it's easy, right? And so they learn through this process that they actually are creative. And so there's a spiritual element, even though our school at one day, many moons ago, was a Christian-based program. Now it's more secular. I could still infuse the spiritual dimensions in the exercises and the projects and watch them come out with these faces like, wow, I could really do this. And you know, the greatest excitement is one will add photography as a minor or a major, and then I'm like, yee, okay, that's great. So, but for me, it's seeing that transition of the fearful student into, wow, this is something new, and then it's something that could actually go with them long after they've left the school.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you guys.
No, can I add to that too? With the students, you know, first day, last day, my first group of freshmen just graduated this year, and I cried. I mean, like, oh my gosh, they presented me a picture, I'm like, I'm so sorry, like, I don't know what's happening. But it's like another way of supporting artists. And I mean, I'm already doing that when I go out and I'm like, oh, I love this work, like, who is this? And even if it's like a product design, I just get so excited about it, and I want to share like my cohort's work, I want to share my students' work, and I love staying connected with them and seeing where they're going, like whether they're going into a master's program or they went into a design firm, and just seeing just all those years and how they're utilizing it. It's so cool, so beautiful.
So if I get teary-eyed when you guys are...
You better cry.
When we're hooding you guys, when we're putting the hoods on you. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap up?
What do you think, like, is the art academic world growing? Is this an industry? Like, is there more jobs now for art professors? Is it shrinking? Is it growing? How's the online thing? This is just more a practical question. What's the temperature of that career?
It's jobs. It's jobs in general, you know? I mean, I think that, you know, just like in any field, you know, I mean, it takes work and effort, you know. When people go to law school, they don't become partners right away. When people go to, medical school, they don't have their own practice. It takes time, but there are jobs, you know, if you're willing to relocate, there's jobs. If you want to stick around here, then there's jobs too, but it takes time, you know. But it happens because people retire, you know? And it happens because people need adjunct, work, So it is possible, But again, the more you make yourself those credentials, the resume, it's like, man, no one could deny you. You know what I mean? That's where you want to be at. It's like, hey, this is the muralist that's done, that's done product design, that's done this. It's like, oh, we need this person on board.
I guess I'm asking because it seems to me like in the art programs and schools I know about, like teachers are getting laid off more than teachers are getting hired. So I'm not asking because I want encouragement to go do more, to go do that. I'm just wondering, like, are we pumping out a lot of art students who and are there jobs there?
Right.
Like, is it a different temperature than it was before, or is it the same?
Right. So what I'm trying to say is, not everyone that gets an MFA wants to go into teaching, There's different tracks. Some people end up going into curating. Some people end up going to artist administration. Some people end up having they don't want to teach. It's like, you're not going to get me in a classroom, I just want to be in my studio and do art, and they're successful at it, And that's what at least I'm trying to do with this program, to make sure you guys have the resources to know how to work with galleries, how to present your resumes, how to, do some financial stuff, so that you guys are taken care of, and we continue to be resources after you get out. But there's so many, just like even if we look at middle school, to apply to get a middle school art job, there's not like 5 middle school teachers in one school, right? There's only one, so it's same thing. There's not 6 math teachers, it's like, so it just depends, But you guys have anything else to add to that?
I was just going to add that education, period, is under transition. It's changing massively. You have preschoolers who are coming to school with their iPads and they're learning on games. But who's making those games? Artists, right? The artist's career is exponentially growing in our contemporary community, but education is shifting and changing how you do it. Even here, APU, this is an amazing change from a traditional program where you come for 2 years or 3 years to get an MFA on campus. And adjustment has been made so that you can learn as an adult professional, keep your job, but get the education you need. There's so many massive changes to education, to the point there are people who have artistic skill who are going online, setting up their blogs and their websites where you can take their course, pay them their money, and learn from them. You may never need a degree, It's shifting so much. Where are you going to get your education? High school, are you going to go to the building, or are you going to do it in your bedroom at home? All of that's beginning to make education feel like shifting sand. But in the art world, your best education is going to be right next door to your professor. You're going to learn and pick up those tools the best when you're in person with them. I don't think art needs to worry a lot about the transition that's happening, because your best education will be done when someone is right beside you and you're making mistakes and they're helping you, and and you're getting that kind of education. It doesn't mean it will be the only way, though. There can be a lot of learning that takes place when you're not in the same room at the same time.
Great answer. So with that, we're going to have to end. We're past our time, but thank you so much for coming. Appreciate it.